The kids work for about 6 months. They start in January and they end up here. But they are available all year long to perform for organizations that call me. In fact, last night after I got home, the DAR had called me and they wanted my kids. So they do perform all year long. We do have a roster. If you're interested in having them come to your organization, call the Historical Society and then we will put you in touch with whoever you want, and they will be glad to come and entertain you all through the year. Another thing that they do through the year, and I had it on last night, but I got it dirty, they have a contest within the kids, and they design a T-shirt. And the only one I see tonight that won this year, she's sitting back there. She's stand up, Barbara, so they can see our T-shirt. The little gal that played Wild Horse Annie last night designed that one. This was last year's. Who did this one? Her name is on it. Who is it? Yes, it's Desiree. She's the one that was Lizzie Maud Montgomery last night. So you missed the T-shirt designs. But every year, one of the kids wins the design contest, and then we have them printed up, and then they all get T-shirts. Our program is funded in part by Nevada Humanities. They give us a grant. That's why I passed out the evaluation sheets. At the end of the program, I have to send in an evaluation of the program. They like to know what's going on. In 1999, they called me from Reno. Has a real big Chautauqua. They have a grown-up Chautauqua that performs at night. They do theirs in July. And the kids are on in the daytime up there in San Rafael Park. If you're interested, just watch the paper. It's in there. But anyway, they called me and they said they would like us to set one up here. So we went up there, and they had 100 kids the time that we went up there. There was 100 kids in that group. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, it started down here, and it's been we have never had more than probably 20, but we get a lot of homeschool kids. This year we happen to have 2 or 3 or 4 from the regular elementary school, so that was good. Mostly we've had homeschool. But anyway, it's been a real good program for us, and the kids will be performing, and then they will ask you to ask them questions. And so think of questions while they're talking, and then when they're done with the questions, then they come out of character, and you can still ask them some more questions. So that's how the program works. They have to, before they can come here, they also have to perform 3 times in the community. And they've done that. They've all done that. That's why they're here. And I think we have just one of our students that couldn't be here tonight. She had to go on a trip. School was out and they left. So we just have one that couldn't make it tonight. But anyway, enjoy the program.
I'm Mike Maloney, the MC, and we're going to have presenters come up here one at a time, do their thing. And like Theodore Roosevelt, he hated me calling Teddy. He got mad at me one time when I called him Teddy. He said that a Chautauqua is the most American thing in America, and I agree with him. I love doing them myself. For our first presentation tonight, we are honored with the presence of Ms. Jacqueline Kennedy.
Hello everyone, my name is Jacqueline Kennedy. I was born July 28, 1929 in Southampton, New York. I was the eldest daughter of John Brunet Bouvier III and Janet Norton Lee Bouvier. I had a younger sibling named Caroline Lee. As a child, I enjoyed reading, painting, and writing poems. I also had a very strong relationship with my father. My education was strong. I went to 6 different schools, including college. For grammar school, I attended the Chapin School in New York City and the Holton Arms School in Washington, D.C. For high school, I attended Mrs. Potter's boarding school. The first college I attended was Vassar College, which is an all-girls school in upstate New York. For my junior year, I studied abroad at Grenoble and Sorbonne in Paris, France. And I was named Debutante of the Year in 1948. For my senior year, I attended and in 1951 graduated from George Washington University in Washington, D.C. I was once engaged to a man named John Husted, but our engagement was called off due to my mother's advice. She said his job as an accountant he made too little money and his job as an accountant was a bore. I met a man named John F. Kennedy at a dinner party. He was a Democratic congressman. I had met him previously, but Husted and I were still engaged. By the time John F. Kennedy and I were married, September 12, 1953, he was now a senator. My gown and bridesmaids' gowns were made by Anne Lowe, a famous fashion designer. Our guest list numbered nearly 2,000. For our honeymoon, we returned to Washington, D.C. My husband announced he was going to run for President of the United States. John and I have 5 children, 2 of which did not live to childbirth. Caroline Lee was my first living child, and she was born in 1957. And John F. Kennedy Jr. was born in 1960. And Patrick I will discuss with you later. John announced he would be running for President of the United States in January of 1960. He spent long hours campaigning, but I was always by his side. He narrowly beat Richard M. Nixon. John F. Kennedy Jr. was born a few weeks after John was elected. A few days after I moved into the White House, I decided I would restore it, and I planned to restore it, and I decided I would. I looked through basements and rooms to look for discarded items. On February 14th of 1961, CBS taped a tour of the White House, and I got to give the entire world that tour. John and I were invited to a trip to India during his presidency. I also had my sister Lee come along, and we had much fun. Patrick was our 3rd child, but unfortunately he was premature, which resulted his death 2 days later. After Patrick died, I told John, the worst thing now would be to lose you. John and I were invited to a campaigning trip in Dallas, Texas. We were in the convertible limousine when out of nowhere 3 gunshots rang out. The first hit John and the governor of Texas, and the second 2 also hit John. A few seconds later, I climbed onto the back seat to get a Secret Service agent, and we rushed John to the hospital. Unfortunately, the injuries to his brain and head, or his neck and brain, were too severe for him to live. I am Jacqueline Kennedy, and I am in mourning. Are there any questions for me? Yes.
Did your mother approve of Jack?
Yes, she did.
How old are you?
34. Yes.
How many languages do you speak?
4. French, I know Spanish, and then I forgot the other ones. Yeah, but that's three. Any more questions? Yes.
How did you get to Texas?
We were on a plane. Is that what you mean by it?
What plane?
I don't know. Any more questions? Hello, my name is Shaylin Dieter. This is my first year in Chautauqua. I'm going into the 5th grade and I go to Mormon Elementary. Are there any questions for me as the researcher? Yes.
What made you choose Jacqueline Kennedy?
I thought she was a really neat person. She was into fashion like I was. Yes.
Did you know that she had family who had a ranch here in Douglas County?
No, I didn't. That's neat. Any more questions? Because I really thought she was a neat person and she's into fashion like I am.
Our next presenter used to do a lot of sewing, I believe. And I believe she may tell us something of the fashion of some of the things that she used to create. Would you please welcome Betsy Ross?
Hello everyone, my name is Betsy Ross. I was born in 1752 and I was born January 1st. I had 6 older sisters, 2 younger sisters, 1 younger brother, and 2 loving parents, and of course myself. Did you know that Liberty Bell and I are twins? One reason why is I have a lot of liberty for our country, and the second reason why is we were born the same year. When I was but 6 years old, I had 12 people, including me and my family. I had 6 older sisters, 2 younger sisters, 1 younger brother, myself, and my 2 loving parents, as I said again. One night we were all sitting at the family dinner table. 10 people, I thought, puzzled. It looked crowded. I told my family my conflict. Then I asked if I could help build a new table with my brother George and my father. Just then my brother George exclaimed, "Thee is a girl, thee cannot build a table." But I wanted to show him what girls are made of, so I went to my father's shed to try to build a doll table. But when I grabbed the saw, it kind of bounced off the shelf and hit me in the head. Luckily, it didn't cut me. But when I cut the wood, the saw cut my finger. Hopefully, thee learns a lesson about playing with thy father's tools. I ran to my mother, urgently. She had a long talk with me. She said I was determined to do everything my younger brother George did. And she was kind of right. She told me to close my eyes. I did as I was told. I heard the pitter-patter of her feet running across the kitchen. But when I opened my eyes, I was amazed. In my hand lay the silver thimble. It had been passed down in my family for years. I won many sewing contests with that thimble. Most of them were at my school. I went to a Quaker school because I and my family were Quakers. Although I did not want to be a Quaker. But when I married my husband John Ross, I became a patriot. That was because my husband was a patriot. Doing so allowed me not to attend Quaker meetings or go to Quaker churches. I learned a lot from my Quaker school, but I also learned a lot from my mother. One of the things I learned was how to make bread. Oh, how I loved helping in the kitchen with my mother, especially when we were making bread. This might sound quite unpleasant, but I still use the same dough my grandmother used as a kid. It's not that unpleasant. All we did was take a little bit of dough to put in the next batch, basically making it the same dough. But I can make more than bread. I can make the clothes. My Aunt Sarah taught me how. That reminds me, one time I fixed a wealthy girl's dress. Well, my friends Susanna Claypole and Joe Ashburn and I were all playing at the harbor. because Joe's uncle owned a ship there. He ran to us and told us about the girl and how her rich, fancy uncle was supposed to pick her up. But the rain was too strong, so we had to take her to the inn. But when she got off the carriage, her dress ripped, and it got muddy too. It was really expensive and really fancy. But luckily, I carry a needle and thread everywhere I go, so I fixed it, and the mud got off too. The next day, her uncle paid me 1 whole sovereign. I used that sovereign to buy ice skates, even though it was July. When I was 14, I entered a sewing contest in the carnival. My sisters convinced me. We were all sitting around the fireplace, and I bring up the carnival sewing contest. They insisted I should go, and insisted I would win. I kept telling them I wouldn't, but they talked me into it. But what could I make? I thought. I looked around the room. There was nothing I could have made, but I looked again, and I saw a sampler. It was made by me when I was about 6 years old. I thought, a sampler would be too childish to make for a sewing contest that all ages are admitted. But I did so anyway. I put the Liberty Bell on my sampler, and a navy blue sky. Everything was perfect, except for the stars. I wondered why. I asked my mother. She told me because they were 6-pointed, not 5. I didn't understand. That was when she taught me how to cut a 5-pointed star in one snip. I tried the 5-pointed stars. Those looked beautiful. I would enter that sampler in the sewing contest. My brother George kept insisting I would win. I never thought so. I told him not to get his hopes up, but I did win. I got a lot of money, too. I gave that money to my mother and my father. But I can sew more than clothes or samplers. I can make flags. That reminds me, this year I made the first American flag for the colonies. I was going to bring the sample to George Washington, but I stopped by here first. Let me show it. Do you see those 13 stars? Those are for the 13 colonies, which are going to be declared states, says George Washington. And see those 13 stars? They're for the 13 colonies also, all in one circle for one community. Blue is for justice, red is for toughness and hardness, and white is for pureness and innocence. This mustn't get dirty, so I must put it away now. You are probably wondering how I got to make the flag. Well, my husband, John Ross, his uncle, works with George Washington. John told him about all the sewing I've done and how popular I was in Philadelphia. So it was that day when George Washington came to my doorstep to ask me to make the American flag. Of course I said yes. I was going to check the design with George Washington right after I stop here first. That has been the tale of my life so far. Are there any questions?
How old were you when you made the flag?
Yes, I did, to John Ross, my husband. Yes?
How old were you when you made the flag?
I made the flag this year. I'm 24. Yes? Well, I was thinking stars and stripes would be a good formation to show our country's liberty and freedom. Yes?
Who decided on the colors?
I did, but I haven't shown it to George Washington yet, so I don't know if he's going to approve it. Yes?
Why didn't you like being a Quaker?
Well, I think that patriots are more on the side, are are not treated that fairly from King George because of all those taxes they're putting on us. And so I thought my family was very, very poor. And when I have a family, if I do so, I don't want to have to not be wealthy enough to take care of them. So I really think that we should have our freedom and fairness of being treated the same way as England does. Yes?
After George Washington approved your flag, where was it first flowing?
He hasn't approved of it yet.
Okay. When he does approve it, where will it be first flowing?
Well, I don't see where it would be first flowing because it hasn't been approved. Yes?
What kind of material is the flag made out of?
Well, I think some silk. No, not silk. Goodness gracious. Are you okay? Oh. Okay. Oh. No. I think there's some cotton in the fabric that I did, but I don't think I stuffed it with cotton, if that's what you're saying. Are there any more questions? I am Serena Harrop. I go to Pinion Hills Elementary School. I am in the 6th grade. This is my first year doing Young Chautauquas, and I am 10 years old. Are there any questions for me as the researcher? Well, because she has a lot of freedom and fairness. She really believed in that, and same like me. And actually, just to try this out, my mother said, well, if you're going to do this, you're going to have to do Betsy Ross. Because we have the costume and the flag and everything already, so... Alright, I think... Yes?
Where did the flag first flown?
I don't know. I will research that, though. Yes?
Chosen someone else. Do you have someone else you would have done?
Well, I would have done Shirley Temple, but she hasn't died yet. But I really wouldn't have really known what I would have done other than... Yes?
Will you do it next year?
Yes, I will. We're already trying to decide on which character I'm doing.
I have no more dresses. That's it.
Thank you.
We do appreciate the Nevada State Park System and the Rangers for staying on, for allowing us to be here. In fact, I think we ought to give them a big round of applause. Thank you. Are you enjoying this show so far? All right. Our next presenter is like a heroine of mine, somebody I've always admired, and I would truly like to know what actually did, in fact, happen to her. Ladies and gentlemen, please make welcome a pioneer in aviation, Amelia Earhart.
Blankets, check. Food, I think I must have forgotten that. Hi, I didn't see you there. My name is Amelia Earhart. I'm getting ready for my 29,000-mile-long trip across the equator with my co-pilot and navigator. I was born on July 24th, 1897 in Atchison, Kansas. in my grandmother's house. I have one younger sister named Muriel. She is my only other sibling. Me and Muriel like to do a lot of things together. One year, my family, my mother, my father, and my sister and I went to the fair in St. Louis, Missouri. We saw a roller coaster there, and we thought it would be fun to build one of our own. So when we got home, we took 2 pieces of plywood, set them up against our shed in our backyard, and built our own buggy. With my uncle's supervision, I was the first one to try it out. So when I went down, I accidentally crashed and fell on my head. But did that stop me? No. I tried it again, and the second time was more successful. We liked to go sledding in the winter too. One year we were sledding down a hill, and I wanted to go really, really fast. So I got a running start and went down on my sled. I saw a horse and sleigh coming, and I couldn't stop because I was going too fast and they couldn't see me. So I just decided to try and make it across before they made it or crash. But I made it, and I went underneath the horse's legs and made it on the other side safely. I first became interested in flying when my father took me to an air show in Long Beach, California. This was about 17 years after Orville and Wilbur Wright had first flown an airplane. I saw people do loops and walk on the wings of the planes, and I was really interested. So I saw an advertisement for a airplane instructor. Her name was Nita Schnook. She was offering flying lessons for $1 an hour. Months later, after I had first became one of her students, I bought my own airplane. It was quite small, but with my mother's help, we bought my very own airplane. It was yellow, and I named it after a yellow canary, so it was called the Canary. Amy Guest had been offered to fly across the Atlantic as a passenger. Her parents wouldn't allow it, so a friend of hers suggested that I would. And once he offered this experience to me, I quickly said yes. So I was the first woman to fly across the Atlantic as a passenger. After I came back from England, I started my own clothing line at Macy's. It was a women's airplane flying clothes there, and I also started my own group which offered women to fly. I forgot something on my list, but is there any questions before I leave?
What year is this?
The year is 1937, I believe.
Are you flying alone?
No. I have my co-pilot and my navigator. But that's pretty much it, because there's not a lot of room in the airplane. I don't know. I haven't really experienced it yet, so as long as it will take me, I guess.
How, this is not your original plane that you bought? Where did you
No.
get this plane?
I can't remember, but it's a different plane.
How are you financed?
Could you explain the question more? My husband, George Putman. I'm a little bit nervous, but I've had several flying experiences, so I will be a little bit nervous. Is there any more questions? Hi, my name is Darby Mattinson. I am in the 7th grade. I'm 12 years old. I'm the oldest of my brother and my sister, and I enjoy American history, reading, and swimming. Is there any questions for me as a researcher? I chose this character because I had done a Chautauqua on her in 4th grade, but I didn't know that much about her, so I wanted to learn more.
You want to become a pilot?
No, not really. I think my character died. She probably just sunk in her plane because, well, the story is she was going to land on this small island actually on this ship to get more gas and then fly to her next destination. But the ship that she was supposed to land on couldn't reach her with her radio, so they don't know what happened after that. So I think her plane would have just gone down and went in the ocean.
Have you ever flown in a plane, and if so, what size?
I have flown in several planes. The only planes I really remember is from probably ages 6 to now. They were probably much bigger than she would have flown in, because they were passenger planes with like rows and stuff. She would have flown in one that only would carry food and blankets.
So you've never been in a small
No.
work passenger?
Mm-mm.
That would have been a good research.
Thank you.
Have all of you got one of those yellow things that tell us about who's who and what's what? Good. Then you try to pronounce it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Ari Bestabrudijuji. Like I said, you pronounce it. Currently a minister in the Calvin Presbyterian Church in Louisville, Kentucky. He was a champion speed skater in his youth and one of the most decorated people in World War II. Please make him welcome.
My name is Ari Bestabrucha. Don't even try to pronounce it. It's impossible. I'll start off by telling you a story about that. I'd escaped Europe in 1941, joined the Dutch army, and was sent to England for some training. There, I was sent to the Royal Military College, which is the British equivalent of West Point. It was the first time in the history of the Royal Military College that non-Britishers were admitted. There were 12 of us, a few Norwegians, a few Poles, and a few Dutchmen. I happened to be the tallest, so I was standing first in line. And we were addressed by what was called the regimental sergeant major, supposedly the man with the loudest voice in the British Army. Now you were always addressed from at least 20 yards distance. This was to develop, as they said, your battlefield voice. So the introduction went something like this. What's your name, sir? Best approach, sir. Your name, sir. Best approach, sir. How do you spell that, sir? B-E-S-T-E-B-R-E-U-R-T-J-E, sir. How do you pronounce that, sir? Best approach, sir. I'll call you distribution, sir. During the war, most people just called me Captain Harry. Now I'm simply called Dr. B. I was asked to tell you about some of my war experiences. I was picked to serve in an outfit called Special Forces, also called the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services. Or maybe you remember the name of the Cloak and Dagger Boys. Well, when the American boys joined us in early 1943, we were the only truly completely Allied outfit. We had representatives from every one of the Allied nations during World War II. One of the better-known operations in which I took part was Operation Market Garden. The attack was the lightning stroke needed to topple the Third Reich and effect the end of the war in 1944, but the plan fell apart at Arnhem. In 9 days, more than 17,000 Allied soldiers were killed, wounded, or reported missing. The tragedy was, it could have worked. When we jumped, it was right into the middle of the enemy on a bright, sunny day near Nijmegen. I was wounded in both arms, and they wanted to amputate my finger, but I wouldn't let them. They had me in a tent ready to ship me out, but I just rolled under the flap and took off. I figured I could still use a gun. I pulled the trigger with my middle finger. In all, I was shot 8 or 9 times and got a bayonet wound in the knee. I was also involved in the attempted capture of the German concentration camp Westerbork, where Anne Frank and her family were held. Sadly, we missed Anne, her mother, and her sister by mere months. There were 4 of us, myself, Captain Harcourt, Lieutenant Captain Van Dugteren, and Sergeant Summers. We jumped into heavy fog that was so thick I couldn't see the ground coming up until it was too late. When I hit, I broke my right ankle. Captain Harcourt found me and helped me hide in some brush under a tree. Then he went to see if he could find the others. I never saw him again. As morning came, I found out that we had jumped right into the middle of the camp itself. Later, I overheard some guards say that they had captured Harcourt and shot the others when they landed. I knew I had to get out of there soon. On the 5th night, I crawled to the fence under cover of darkness and made my escape into the surrounding fields. The next day, I saw some farmers working in the fields as well as some boys. Late in the afternoon, they started to leave. I waited until the last one, a young boy, and tried to call out to him. But my throat was so dry from lack of water all those days that I could only whisper. I struggled to my knees and waved. The boy came over and I asked him for some food. He said he would have to ask his father. The farmer's name was Jan Scruton. When they got me inside, I asked what date it was, and they told me, and his wife told me it was April 12th, 1945, my 29th birthday. I will always be grateful to that brave family for the grand birthday gift they gave me that year. Later, I found out that they had others also hidden away on the farm. I wondered how they could get enough food to feed us all, since it was the hunger winter that year. He asked me if I said the Lord's Prayer. I nodded. Then he said, "Then you say, 'Give us this day our daily bread.'" I nodded again. "If you don't believe it, you shouldn't say it," he told me. For my part in the war, I have been awarded the highest medals for valor that could be awarded to a foreigner by the French, British, and American governments, as well as the Dutch Medal of Honor, Holland's highest award. In all, all told, I received 18 awards, giving me the distinction of being one of the most highly decorated soldiers of World War II. Before the wars, but to me, Jan Scruton is the true hero. He was a man who knew what was right and wasn't afraid to do it. Just like the Good Samaritan in the Bible, he took a chance to help a wounded stranger by the road. Before the war started, I had married Gertrude Birch, and we had one daughter while I was in training in England. But I sent them to America, where my family was then living. After the war, now my wife and I have 2 more daughters and a son. After the war, I eventually rejoined my family in New York, where I worked as a lawyer for a time. As a young boy, I'd been a champion speed skater and was twice on the Olympics team. I loved to skate, and so on the side, I worked with Dick Buttons in some ice shows. I went by the name Mr. X, so my clients wouldn't recognize me. But after a while, I didn't want to work as a lawyer or a skater anymore. My dangerous experiences and brushes with death became one of many reasons that influenced my decision in becoming a minister in the Presbyterian Church. It seemed to me that ultimately all questions boil down to the religious questions. In many ways, my current battles are more difficult than the ones in Europe, when if you lost the Jeep, they gave you a new Jeep, and you lost a rifle, they gave you a new rifle, and you keep fighting. You keep fighting simply for a good cause and against evil. Now I fight evil with the Word of God, and most days I think I'm winning. Well, it seems I have gone on long enough. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask me? Yes?
How many parachutes did you have when you jumped out?
Lost count.
Good answer.
Yes.
How old are you?
I am 41. Yes.
What made you choose this particular character to portray? good job.
Yes.
Yes.
You said you were the tallest. How tall were you?
Are you?
About 6 feet. Any more questions? My name is Pearson Jarvis. I'm 11 years old, and I'm homeschooled. And I picked this character because I'm half Dutch, and in homeschool, I'm learning about World War II. So are there any questions for me?
Do you speak Dutch?
No.
Are you going to?
Yes. Yes. No.
Is your mustache itchy?
Yes. Any more questions?
I'll ask you a question again. You asked him a while ago that he couldn't answer because he was still
Oh, someone else. He answered it.
Okay.
I don't speak Dutch either. In fact, I have a hard time with English. Before I forget, which actually I did forget, but I just got reminded of it a short time ago. After our last presenter is up here this evening, we like to have all of the presenters come up and get on the stage so that all of you can take pictures of them, get their autographs, talk to them, whatever the case might be, and enjoy them. And we do want you to know how much we appreciate everybody being here tonight. It's beautiful to have this kind of support. We thank you. How many people ever read Black Beauty? Yeah, great book, wasn't it? Well, among other things, I believe our next presenter wrote that. Would you please welcome Anna Sewell?
Good evening. My name is Anna Sewell. I am very happy to be here today and grateful that I feel well enough. Today I wish to give you a little insight as to what my life is like and tell you what I'm doing to help the general welfare of animals, especially the overworked cab horses of England. But in order for you to understand a large part of my education, comfort, and daily lifestyle, I must first tell you of my mother. My dear mother has always been my friend, educator, and inspiration. She is also a well-known author of the time. I do enjoy editing her books for her. We are each other's soulmates and partners in everything. My mother is so imaginative, creative, and gentle, where I am fearless and more circumspect. My mother sought out to educate my brother Philip and me when we lived in London and Great Yarmouth because there wasn't a school. She wanted us not just to be taught by school books, but by virtues. We know virtues that are stimulating, animating, affectionate, not depressing. We know obedience through habit and self-restraint. I am ashamed to admit I did not learn obedience, self-restraint, or tidiness as quickly as Mother hoped I would have. When we were younger, Mother wrote Philip and I a book called Walks with Mama. It was of a girl named Anne and her adventures. She originally wrote the book so she could earn a little extra money to buy our school books for the year, but she found that the one-syllable short series of stories served as an excellent reading primer and taught her virtues. My mother has given me such guidance, insight, and courage. But her most favorite subject to teach us was nature. When we lived in London, Mother was often depressed because of the filthiness around us. So when we moved to the coast so my father could work at the sea, she was much happier. She would take Philip and I on long, enjoyable nature walks. Just like her mother, she too believes that natural history leads to happiness and gracefulness and tenderness through God. We would stop and look at all of the wonderful different species. Mother would tell us the name of all these creatures. We would talk about how every single animal was important and how all of the other animals needed that animal. We had such fun on those walks. Mother never forced religion upon us. She thought it would be better if we found spirituality out for ourselves. Mother was never that strict, but when I was younger, found I wasn't doing everything that I should, and was being quite lazy and stubborn at times. This caused her to be angry, and she felt I had to be watched closer than Philip. That is why he was able to attend school before me. But that special time when Philip was at school helped my mother and I to bond, and I was soon very structured in everything that I did. But Mother still felt that I needed her, and didn't let me attend school until we moved once again. When I was 12, we moved to the Palatine Cottage in Stoke Newington, because my father had once again been cheated out of his money and his business had failed. We rented a house which had acres of meadowland, which we turned into a farm. In the mornings, Philip fed the cows and then scurried off to school. I fed the hens and the bees. Oh, I do love the bees. After that, I would go inside and help Mother with the chores. Then we would do my schooling lessons. Our days were very structured, and there was a time for everything. But when my mother heard that her brother was very sick and ill and needed her help, she kindly took him in and nursed him, which left her with no extra time to teach me. That meant I was able to go to school. I was so excited. I had always wanted to go to school, and I was also very glad that Mother thought I was ready. The 2 years that I expanded my education in mathematics and French proved excellent. I found such comfort in girls my age. When Mother taught me, I wasn't exposed to other girls. I am quite a social person. I love to paint and draw. Right before I wasn't able to attend school anymore, my teachers had even started to show special attention to my oil paintings. Those were some of the happiest days that I've had. When I was 14, just 2 years ago, all of that freedom came to an abrupt halt. I was walking home from school one day when the skies opened up and it started to rain. My first instinct was run home as quickly as I could, for I did not want to disappoint Mother by being soaking wet. Right as I turned the corner of her driveway, I tripped and tumbled into a heap, spraining both my ankles. Mother came running out and helped me inside. The doctors were called and my ankles are set. But as we found out later, it wasn't done correctly. Mother was very upset and disappointed. Ever since that day, I have been and still am lame, crippled, and disabled. Those words echo in the back of my mind while I try to move on. I am fortunate to be here today and to feel well enough. My mother has tried many different remedies, but nothing has worked. As a child, I always spent so much time outside, exploring and learning with hand-on activities, but I am now limited to be outside independently. It gets very frustrating for me to have to ask people to do the simplest things for me. A major part of my life, which I haven't yet shared with you, is my joy and love for and with horses. My grandparents live on the Dudwick farm in Buxton, and if any of you have been there, you know what a grand place it is. That is where I first learned the exhilarating feeling of riding a horse. The joy of feeling the horse underneath you, using its powerful legs to propel you forward, is just indescribable. I learned many basics at the farm in Buxton. It has led me to be able to ride like I do today. When I was younger, my parents seemed to see that horses were going to be a part of my life forever, and I received my very own pony, with the help of my grandparents. We kept him in Buxton, which made me want to visit my grandparents all the more. He was a dapple gray and not very tall. He never did anything wrong. My pony was the sweetest little thing. But one time my obnoxious cousins came over and wanted to make my pony go faster by using sticks as whips. My pony showed them just how he felt about that. He threw them off, not that hard, but hard enough to have them not do it again. They gave up riding my pony, to my greatest pleasure. Philip also shared his love for riding. He had a beautiful, frisky black horse. We would ride together much of the time. I haven't been able to go see my pony lately, but I will ask my mother if I may. People in this world can be so cruel, not necessarily to other people, but to the animals that get them what they want. After I was injured and before I retrained myself to ride, I relied on others to drive me places in horse-drawn carriages. Many of the cab drivers never give their horses a day of rest. They do not even get good grain to keep them of a proper body weight. They are overworked and beaten with whips to make them go faster when they can't go any farther. I've witnessed horses just drop dead of exhaustion. It bothers me so much. How could you ride in a cab with a horse that's starving and lame in his feet? It doesn't make sense. And how I do hate bearing reins. They shorten the life of a horse by innumerable years, just because of fashion. And I hate whips, just as much as I do bearing reins. One of my goals in life is to help spread the awareness of the cruelty done to these cab horses. Some people act oblivious as to what is happening, and it makes me angry. I want to do something more, but I've been having a hard time of thinking about what I should do. If you have any ideas, please share them with me. I've been concerned about the welfare of animals since I was a little girl. One day, a bird poacher shot a bird, and it landed in the yard where I was playing. When he came to the gate to retrieve it, I wouldn't let him in and told him all I knew about how wrong he was to shoot the bird for no reason at all. Then I left him standing at the gate. Treating animals nicely was a large part of my education. Since my injury, I've realized so much. I spend as much time as I can around horses. I am thankful for all the support that my family has given me. I'm motivated to change how these cab horses are being treated for the better. I'm partially inspired by my mother by writing. Maybe I shall write a book someday about the cruelty done to these horses, but I must do it in a unique manner so people will listen and pay attention. Well, I need to get going soon to help my mother with her chores. If you have any questions, I have time to answer them. Yes?
What are bearing reins?
They hold, in the cab horses, they hold the horse's head way up high, and they, just because, I don't know why, people think it looks good, but they just shorten the life because they hold the horse's neck in such an unnatural way.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes?
How old were you when you started school?
Oh, my mother, I started reading and writing around the age of 5, but my mother was always teaching Philip and I virtues and how to act and just be decent. Yes?
What was your horse's name?
My horse's name was Mary Legs. Any other questions? Yes? I went to school for 2 years. Yes? Yes, my mother taught me to read. I didn't start attending school until I was 12, and by that time I had learned basic reading and writing and everything. Yes?
What is Philip doing now?
Philip is helping my father in a bank that my father has started, and it is the most successful job that my father has done so far. Yes?
How many books did you write?
Well, I haven't written any books yet, but I may. Oh, yes? Or are there any other questions back there? Yes?
Would you like to write a book about a black horse?
Well, I don't know. Philip has a black horse. Are there any other questions? Okay. My name is Avery Hudak. I'm 13 years old. This is my second year of Chautauqua, and I will now answer questions as the researcher. I picked my character because I read Black Beauty and I really enjoyed the book, and I also did a last-minute character switch, and she was the first person that came to my mind. Yes?
Now, how many books have you written?
Anna Sewell only wrote one book, and it was actually the first of its kind to have the horse speaking, and it actually set off a trend. Yes? Well, I don't know if I would agree that cars are better. Well, they get people where they went faster. They do, have the whole pollution thing. But horses did take a long time, and it was very bumpy. And yes?
Were you ever able to get your legs fixed?
Anna Sewell, she lived her whole life crippled, and she died. Well, the injury set off lupus, which is the body attacking its own organs, and that's how she died when she was 58. Yes?
How old were you when you published Black Beauty?
Well, in different ways. I think just because the prices of things are going up, so people won't pay to feed their animals, but with like beating and whipping, and I think less. Did you have a question? Yeah?
I just wondered how old you were when you published Black Beauty.
She was 58 actually, and she worked on the book for the last 5 years of her life while she was dying, and I didn't portray her at that age because she was literally on her deathbed. So yes, I do. Any other questions? Oh, yes?
So when did you change characters? And so how did you have fast to work on this one?
2 or 3 months, maybe less, I don't know. Yeah. My original character is Grace Daneberg.
Do you have any horses of your own?
Yes, I have my own horse.
What's its name?
Champ. Are there any other questions?
Aren't these guys great? Huh? Let's hear it. We are extremely grateful to the Nevada Humanities for the grants they give us every year, and certainly acknowledge that. Every little bit helps. And speaking of that, this program is sponsored by the Douglas County Historical Society. And anyone who is not a member of it, you can pick up an application at the Gardnerville Museum and Cultural Center. And also, they have their calendars of events that are going on year-round for all of the different Historical Society programs. And one of them I really like to push is the Taste of the Towns. That's coming up Saturday, August 2nd. Fantastic time by everybody. You get to have samples of food from all the restaurants and, all the restaurants participating from Minden and Gardnerville. And one of my all-time favorite bands is going to be down in front of the Gardnerville Museum and Cultural Center. They call them All Hat and No Cattle. They're really good. You got to go see them. And lots of entertainment throughout the area. It's a great walking tour, great food, great fun. That's August 2nd, and you can get tickets at the Gardnerville Museum and Cultural Center. Our next presenter and I have something in common. We both came over here on the Mayflower. Please make welcome Priscilla Mullins.
How now, good people? My name is Priscilla Mullins, and I came here on the Mayflower from Dorking, England in 1620. We moved here because we had difficulties in the Church of England, such as not being able to worship as we pleased, or not even being able to pray as we pleased. So my family and I moved here, the New World. But the only things I could think about during the journey were, will we ever see England again? What will happen to us? What is the New World like? Are the Indians what people say they are? But I had to remind myself that God would take care of us. We started from Southampton. There were two ships for our journey to the New World, the Speedwell and the Mayflower. After the first storm we went through, our ship, the Speedwell, began to leak, so we were forced to turn back to Dartmouth, England, for repairs. Our ship set off again, but the repairs to the speedwell failed, so once again we returned to England, this time to Plymouth. Everyone had to fit on the Mayflower, so what seemed small before was then smaller. The living area below deck was cramped and dark. Our first meals were ship's biscuits, salted meat, and cooked peas pottage. The ship's biscuits were so tough that you had to stop them or break them into little bits to eat them, else it seemed like your jaw would break. And the salted meat was so salty that you could hardly tell it was meat. And peas pottage is made by boiling peas with a little salt or herbs. When we had it, at least our stomachs were full with warm food. Space for living and sleeping was so small that you could not stretch out completely while sleeping without disturbing something or someone. To pass our days, we young folk would sing songs and tell stories. We would also try to play Nine Men's Chorus. But with each new storm, many of us were so seasick that we just slept. In fact, most all of our group had never been to sea, and seasickness took hold of almost everyone. The sailors would make fun of us for this, but we would try to pay them no heed and remember them in our prayers. In one of the last storms we went through, our main beam cracked, and that crack grew and grew. We thought we were going to sink. Our leaders knew this would cause the ship to split in half. I prayed fervently that God would find some way to spare us. Fortunately, someone had a bolt in our goods, and we were able to fix the beam, with a lot of work. We were saved. All were so relieved and thankful to our Lord. After 9 long weeks with false starts and many storms, we finally saw land. What a joy to see land. The dreary voyage was over. I could not wait to get off the boat and back onto dry land again. Before the men got off the boat, they signed the compact. It was an agreement about how we would govern ourselves since we hadn't landed in Jamestown as we had planned. And for us women and children, it would be many weeks' time before we could get off the boat. The land was new to us. Was it safe? Were there Indians about? And the voyage was hard on many of us. Some had become ill and needed care. When our men had built enough shelters, we could get off the boat. We needed to get settled as soon as possible, as winter was setting in. Our many delays in departure put us in the New World late in the year. That first winter was long and hard. So many people became ill and died. My dear father became ill. My mother and I nursed him, but alas, our loving care could not save him. Then my brother Joseph also became ill and died. All this was too much for my sweet mother, and she died too. I was alone, devastated. Coming to the New World was the dream of my father for our whole family, and now my whole family was gone. How thankful I was when the Brewsters kindly took me into their home. They took in other orphans like me, but with so many still ill, I hardly had time to just think. Caring for orphans and tending the sick kept me busy, but I was glad to do it. Sometimes it seemed like that first winter would never end, especially when we only had 5 Indian corn kernels per meal. But spring came with a good summer following it. We finally had more substantial meals. Fewer of our group were sick, and we could also do outdoor work without becoming cold. These were all a great relief because that meant there could be a new beginning for our colony. With winter over, a new pattern of life developed. Working for the Brewsters in the colony found me busy all day long. Before dawn much brightens the sky, I fetched the water for breakfast. I walked the path to the stream to fetch it. Once I'm back, I help with the breakfast. Sometimes the work is very tiring. Wash day is one of those hard, tiring days because you need to boil the clothes, then hang them on bushes to dry. And many of our clothes are very heavy when they're wet, so I do not look forward to wash day. Later, I'll need to mend things or help in the garden. The garden chores are very hard in the heat of the summer. But I gladly sing my songs to help make the time pass. Most of the songs I sing are from the Book of Psalms. Singing psalms has always lifted my spirits. The 23rd Psalm is comforting, and it was especially so after my family died. You see, I learned many psalms from my father. He would read to all of us Bible stories, psalms, and Aesop's fables. Last autumn was very prosperous. In our harvest, we were so blessed with plenty that Governor Bradford declared we should feast and be thankful for what our Lord had provided. There was so much food. The Indians were asked to come, and they did, many of them. And they came with deer and corn. What a great feast it was, and it lasted a week. Indeed, it was a time to be very thankful. Now, not everyone who came on the Mayflower came for religious reasons. One example is John Alden. He is a cooper. He came as the Mayflower's cooper. Back in England, many said coopers were drunkards, but he isn't. He seems a good and honest man. I had heard he thought to return to England when the Mayflower left, but instead decided to stay here. It is a good help to our group to have such a good tradesman as he. I must soon go to help prepare the evening meal with Goodwife Brewster. I don't have much time, but I can answer some questions you might have before I must be off. Yes?
Did you bring any animals with you?
Yeah, we brought some animals.
How old?
Yes.
What is a cooper?
A cooper is a barrel maker and a barrel repairer. Yes?
What animals did you bring?
Oh, we brought cows and other livestock like that.
What did you think Indians were before you arrived?
We thought they were 8-foot-tall savages that ate people. But they're just normal people.
How old were you when you came?
19.
And how old was John Alden?
I don't know. Yes?
Why did you bring him into your story?
Just because he seemed like he was a person that was necessary to our group, even though he really wasn't originally going to stay. Yes?
You mentioned that the women had to stay on the Mayflower. Do you remember how long it was?
It was many weeks. Yes?
Did more livestock come after you arrived?
Yes, more did come.
Have you met John Alden yet?
I've met him.
When you say 5 Indians, 1 pills per meal, did that, like, were there other stuff too, or is that all you got?
That's all we got. Yes?
What is an Indian corn
What did you say?
kernel? What is an Indian corn kernel?
It's a little kernel about that big. But yeah. Yes?
Did you ever eat that pea stuff again when you got to the New World?
Yes. Yes.
You mentioned that a lot of people got ill and died. Do you think that was because they were starving to death, or was there some other diseases?
It could have been part of it, but yeah. Yes.
What was your purpose for going to the New World?
To have religious freedom. Yes.
Has anyone in your group ever found Jamestown?
No, we haven't gone anywhere. Yes. I was very, very scared, but I was relying on God to help us. Yes.
What were the shelters that you made when you first left your life? Is that what you're still living in?
Yes, we're still living in them, but we've built a few more over time.
What are they like?
They're small log cabins with thatched roofs. Hello, my name is Julia Baker. I'm 13 years old, and this is my 4th year of Chautauqua, and now I will answer questions as the researcher. Yes?
How did you pick your character?
I picked my character because I went to Plymouth Plantation, and I liked the costume. Yes?
What other people have you portrayed?
I've portrayed Clara Barton, and Mary Cassatt, and Virginia Reed. Yes?
I detected almost an English accent, slightly. Was that an effect that you did, or were you just talking your normal?
I was just talking.
Tell us about your costume. Where did you get your costume?
We made the skirt and the apron and the coif and the ruff, and we got the top at a thrift store and altered it.
Very, very good.
How old were you when you married John Alden?
She was 21, I think.
Besides reading about your character, have you done anything else in your research? Have you tried to eat Indian corn or anything else as far as experience-wise?
No. Yes?
When did your character die?
They don't really know. They think sometime between 1651 and 1675.
Ladies and gentlemen, our last presenter of the evening will be up here in just a moment, and when he is finished, all of the rest of the young Chautauquans are going to come up on this stage so you can get your pictures, talk to them, and enjoy. And once again, on behalf of the Douglas County Historical Society, we do want to thank you all for being here. Give yourselves a big hand. Yeah. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, he doesn't need an introduction. Mr. Walt Disney.
Hello, I am Walt Disney. I was born on December 5th, 1901 in Chicago, Illinois, but I have always considered Marceline, Missouri to be my hometown. I took my very first train ride when we moved there, and while we were living on the farm, I received my very first genuine artist pad and pencils from my Aunt Maggie. She was the first person to believe in my abilities as an artist and gave me the encouragement I needed to pursue my dreams. As a child, I was always interested in creative activities. I tried my hand at acting and at magic, but it was drawing that was my real passion. Even though my father didn't allow me approve of my being an artist, he did allow me to take some art classes now and then, as long as it didn't interfere with my work as a newspaper boy. You see, after I graduated from 8th grade, we moved to Kansas City, where my father sold newspapers. My brother Roy and I had to help him after school. In 1917, my parents and my little sister Ruth moved back to Chicago, but I stayed behind and lived with Roy and my brother Herbert and his wife while I finished school. Then, during the summertime, I got a job sending newspapers at the local train route. That sure was a great time. That sure was a great time, even though I didn't make any money at it. When I got back home, my father wanted me to, when World War I broke out, I wanted to follow my brother Roy into the Navy. So my friend Russell and I forged our birth certificates since we were only 16 at the time. But Russ wore glasses, so he was turned down, and I didn't want to go without him. Eventually, we had the bright idea of joining the Red Cross, since they were not as particular as the armed forces. But we still needed our parents' signatures, and eventually I convinced my mother to sign for me. She figured that if she didn't sign, I would run off anyway. We ended up in France right after the armistice was declared. I stayed there for a year working at the Red Cross canteen. In order to get more business, I made some posters for the troops to see when they got off the train. And I also made advertisements on the sides of ambulances and on my footlock leather jacket and on my footlocker. Word got out that I could draw, and I soon had a little business of my own. In the end, I was able to send my mother about $500, a much better outcome than the job selling newspapers on the train. When I got back home, my father wanted me to work at the jelly factory he bought in Chicago, but I just knew by now I just had to be an artist, whether he liked it or not. I went back to Kansas City, where I got a job at an advertising company. You can bet that the first person I told was my dear Aunt Maggie. She was thrilled. About this time, I met another fellow artist by the name of Oob Iwerks, and we hit it off great. We started improving animated cartoons. One of the ideas I had was to use celluloid, but our boss at the advertising company wasn't interested, so we worked on it after hours. Eventually, we quit our jobs and started our own company, which we called Laughograms. This company went broke, so I moved to Hollywood, where my brother Roy was now living. One of the ideas we had tried with Laughograms was based upon Alice in Wonderland. Now in Hollywood, we used that same idea, but added live actors with the animation. We called it Alice in Cartoonland. Things really took off after that. Eventually, we made the first full-length animated feature film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Over the years, we have made many different animated films, and introduced some other characters, such as Mickey. We had some problems with the distributors, and one day from New York, and I went there to solve them. So while my wife Lily and I, by this time I got married, so while my wife Lily and I rode the train back from New York City, I was doing some doodling and came up with the idea of Mickey Mouse. I wanted to name him Mortimer after a little pet mouse I had when I was a boy, Lily thought that sounded too sissy. She suggested Mickey instead. About this time, when we got back home, I started working on some cartoons starring Mickey. Before this point, all movies were silent movies, but by now someone had figured out how to add sound, and we thought we had better do the same thing with our cartoons. Mickey Mouse starred in the first animated cartoon to have sound embedded in the film. We called it Steamboat Willie. Things really took off after that. Eventually, we have made many different animated films and introduced a couple of characters such as Mickey's girlfriend Minnie Mouse, his best friends Donald, Duck, and Goofy, his dog Pluto, and others. When World War II broke out, I worked with the government to make training films, some of which included these characters. I wanted to do my part for the war effort. Did you know that Mickey Mouse was the code word for the Allied invasion of France? Before the war, Lily and I became the proud parents of 2 girls. Diane and Sharon are now in their early 20s, and Diane has made me a grandfather. To entertain them as well as any guest we have at the house, I had a scale model railroad built in our backyard and loved giving people rides on it. To entertain, when the girls were little, I used to take them to the zoos and amusement parks. One day, while I was sitting on a bench while they were enjoying a ride, I thought how great it would be if there was some place where we could both enjoy ourselves. That's how I got the idea of Disneyland. Last September, only 2 months after our grand opening, we had our millionth visitor. Next year, I'm going back to my hometown of Marceline for Walt Disney Day. They have asked me to dedicate a new swimming pool at the 10-acre park and recreation center they have named after me. To tell the truth, more things of importance happened to me at Marceline than ever happened or likely to in the future. My life has come full circle. It has been a bumpy ride, but boy, what a ride. Thank you for listening to me as I reminisce a bit about my life so far. I'd be happy now to answer a few questions you might have for me. You might have for me as a scholar.
Where did you do your research?
Since January.
Where?
Oh. On the internet, mostly. And in books, a little bit.
Where else?
Let me see. At Disneyland, yeah. Any more questions? Yes.
Who was the character you portrayed last year?
Mark Twain.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Any more questions for me? Yes. That would be kind of hard. How many times have I been to Disneyland?
Oh.
Yeah. Any more questions?
Have you been to Disney World?
Yep. Yes. I have been to Epcot, but it was like when I was like 5-ish. So, is there any more questions? Yes.
What do you like best about Disneyland?
Just walking around and doing some rides and stuff like that. Is there any more questions?